The gods of war. That status the artillery has defended for hundreds of years, but with technological developments, hypersonic rockets, aviation, and REW assets were to become the main ones on the battlefield. So many NATO artillery subunits were expectedly disbanded as no longer relevant, until they saw what a real full-scale 21st century war was. This changed everything, and set up the brand new rules for artillery fire that nobody expected. What exact rules have settled the Russian-Ukrainian war? And how are the extremely secret and powerful USA artillery launchers helping the Ukrainian military mercilessly defeat their enemy? To get the answers, we will start with Charles VIII, and in a sec, you'll understand why. King Charles VIII of France made artillery the god of war in the 15th century. His cannons were on wheels, the barrels adjustable on trunnions, and they fired identical cannonballs rapidly. At that time, bombers could fire cast iron or stone cannonballs, as well as buckshot, earth, and small stones. In addition, they were also bulky and heavy, requiring complex, separate logistics and special stands and stops to stay in place after the shot. Charles VIII turned the game around, but girls still loved the cavalrymen until another French leader had appeared, Napoleon. Yes, this guy started as an artilleryman. This is probably why, later, even infantrymen had artillery training. They could shoot with a speed of 2 shots in a minute. This is very fast, considering that before each shot, the artilleryman had to eliminate the weapon's recoil, clean the barrel after the previous shot, put in a portion of powder and new ammunition, and take aim. The number of guns in the Emperor's army reached 590 units at the Battle of Borodino. Further, the number of artillery became a factor in the victory. Up to 6,000 cannons of different calibers and types took part in World War I. The massive fire tactic, rapid deployment, and concentration of the fire in a limited area were maintained during the Second World War. For example, during the first 30 minutes of the Berlin assault, nearly 500,000 shells were fired. 9,000 cannons were firing, one for every 11 feet. Firstly, the war in Ukraine didn't foretell changes. At the beginning of the Russian full-scale invasion, Ukraine had the biggest artillery forces in Europe after Russia. This was a 1,176-barrel artillery system. Russia had almost the same number, but much more. It was going to be an artillery war. Napoleon, perhaps, jumped up on his throne when he saw from heaven the Ukrainian artillery actions in the first days of a Russian invasion. Large, concentrated targets, the best thing imaginable for the cannons. According to the official data of the Ukrainian military headquarters, up to 80% of Russian army casualties were caused by the artillery particularly. This is even higher than the number of World War I's when the enemy loss caused by artillery was 76%. But those ammunition reserves in Ukraine should be enough for just 6 weeks of full-scale artillery war. Why did that happen? The thing is that within 2015 to 2018, there were 6 explosions in artillery depots. About 210,000 tons of ammunition were destroyed. It is more than 4,152mm artillery shells and MLRS rockets. To compare, during 5 years of war in Donbass, Ukraine lost around 70,000 tons of ammunition. Probably there were diversions in the Russian Special Services. Russian Special Services were also involved in explosions at ammunition depots in the Czech Republic. And after another explosion at an ammunition depot near the town of Karnobat, Bulgaria expelled 70 employees of the Russian embassy because their diplomatic role was just a cover. Because of this lack of ammunition, Ukrainians had to decrease the intensity. Despite this, Ukrainians demonstrate a noticeably better effectiveness of counter-battery warfare. Thankfully to the system Kropiva, Ukrainian artillery is one of the most precise in the world. Aerial reconnaissance of other subunits enter the coordinates of targets into the software developed by volunteers. The nearest artillery battery strikes. Russian artillery losses are much higher. Ukraine compensates for its losses with the cost of the Western partners' supplies. Western artillery systems, Spag Zuzana II, AS-90, Krab, M109 Paladin, Panzerhaubitze 2000, Caesar, and others, as well as M777 trailed howitzers, are highly accurate. But they use NATO standard caliber 155mm, even though Ukrainian systems mainly fire 152mm projectiles. But aside from these most common calibers, the artillery troops use others. 120, 105, 122, 100, and even 85 and 57 millimeter cannons. Ukrainians utilize about 20 artillery systems with different types of ammunition. That is why logistics is vital. Charles VIII, who once introduced unification, is probably sighing in heaven. However, Western artillery systems and ammunition have a more extended range and higher accuracy. This helped Ukraine compensate for the lack of ammunition. Also, Ukrainians had a problem with the number of 155mm projectiles provided. Their allies simply don't have such arsenals. The USA and Europe can produce only nearly 1.2 million of ammunition annually. Why did that happen? The thing is that after the end of the Cold War, 3/4 of all active artillery subunits in European armies were disbanded. For example, the army of modern France has fewer cannons than Napoleon's army. Amos Fox calls this the fallacy of perception. Lieutenant General H.R. McMaster coined another term, the illusion of precision warfare. But the essence is the same. Precision is more important than mass. Therefore, the war in Ukraine has become a cold shower for many Western strategists. At the same time, Russia doesn't have any problems with ammunition. Its current production volume is about 3 million shells per year. Bain & Company's research in artillery shells shows that this year, Russian factories can produce or fix more than 4.5 million of those. Moreover, Russia imports ammunition from other countries, particularly from Iran and North Korea. That is why the intensity of Russian fire is significantly higher. For example, in the first 6 months of 2024, Russian artillery, on average, fired 10,000 shots a day. Meanwhile, Ukraine, 2,000. Truth to tell, the high fire intensity leads to the fast wear and tear of the barrels in Russian artillery systems. The friction of the projectile's exit causes abrasion of the barrel's inner surface. The accuracy and the range of the shot become worse. If the barrel won't be changed on time, it can even cause its blowout. The absence of spare barrels makes Russians' equipment even in such a way, and take out of storage troglodytic Soviet-type cannons D-20 manufactured in the 1950s and 60s. But this cannon can shoot regular 152mm ammunition or modern high-precision projectiles, Krasnopil M. Therefore, it remains an effective force. And here we are, coming closer to the most interesting. The Russian-Ukrainian war experience shocked the US Army and forced them to change their POV to modern artillery strategies. It appeared evident that the massive artillery strikes that brought results in the past wars were not enough anymore. Today, artillery must be massive and high-precise at the same time. That is why it is necessary to find a way to meet both strategies. In this search, the Americans began to acquire projects that had long been considered scrap, but now had a chance to prove their effectiveness on the battlefield. One example is American howitzers that Ukrainian troops recently received. It is a 105mm experimental lightweight howitzer 2CT Hawkeye. They aren't even on the list of US Army weaponry. Its presentation took place in 2011, but at that time, the generals didn't like something in that cannon, so the project almost got lost in the Daedalian hallways of the Pentagon. The war in Ukraine made them blow the dust off those old files. From the beginning, the carries for the 2ST Hawkeye should be wheeled or tracked chassis, ships, or even aircraft. A trailer version was also planned, but in the end, the howitzer got a Humvee chassis. By the way, give a thumbs up if you think the Humvee is the best machine ever. On the first sign, the idea of placing M20 on the Humvee chassis is very simple, but from the technical perspective, it is not. The thing is that the recoil after a 105mm gunshot puts a significant load on the carriage, which is actually a Humvee. So even such a robust machine construction cannot withstand powerful strikes for a long time. So the soft recoil technology, SRT, was applied. The aim is to absorb and reduce recoil forces by moving the cannon forward before firing, and then using a hybrid recoil mechanism to return it to its initial position. Thanks to SRT, the 2CT Hawkeye's rate of fire within the first 3 minutes reaches 8 shots per minute. Due to the modern digital fire control system, the 2CT Hawkeye can make the first shot after 1.5 minutes upon arrival to the position and then leave the position quickly. In this way, Ukrainian artillerymen are acting now in the frontline positions. In other words, the ideal conditions arose for the 2CT Hawkeye. because both sides used single-gun tactics. It happened because of the highly concentrated counter-battery combat. For example, when the artillery radars and UAVs are engaged, Russian navigation cycles can take 3 to 30 minutes. That is what Ukrainian officers told the Rusi Analytic. 3 minutes. Basically, this is the edge of the physical abilities. For comparison, a projectile takes 75 seconds to fly 15.5 miles. That is, the Russians lose 105 seconds for all other operations. Hazardous is the counter-battery option when an Orlan reconnaissance drone is paired with Lancet barrage munitions. The former points at the target, and the latter hit at a distance of up to 45 miles. But for the 2CT Hawkeye crew, the threat can be caused by even cheap FPV kamikaze drones with a range of 10 miles, or drones that drop mines. After all, the range of the M20 gun with conventional shells is only 7 miles. Therefore, the 2ST Hawkeye must operate very close to the enemy's positions and change positions quickly. However, so do the Russians. Nonetheless, 2CT Hawkeye will likely win the game, catch me if you can. The system's external dimensions in the deployed state are about 16 feet long, 8 feet wide, and the same height. These are good indicators for camouflaging reconnaissance aircraft from UAVs, and it is an almost unattainable target for Russian artillery. Aside from that, the automobile chassis gives almost car-like travel speeds. Humvee platform is equipped with 6.5-liter turbocharged diesel engine V8. With this engine, the vehicle reaches its maximum speed of 70 miles per hour. At the same time, the FPV kamikaze drone loaded with explosives has about 12 minutes to cross the gray zone and reach the 2ST Hawkeye position. This time is enough for the Ukrainian crew to shoot back, move away from their position, and become unreachable. That means the howitzer, based on a multi-purpose chassis, realizes the concept of shot and fled. Even though this concept isn't new, the wheeled howitzer made a small revolution. At the Senate hearings, head of the Future Army Command, General James E. Rainey, emphasized, "There are several very good wheeled howitzers that impact a battlefield. We are interested in a very effective autonomous and robotized cannon created by an American partner." His interest in wheeled artillery marks a shift away from the Army's traditional focus on tracked howitzers such as Paladin. Therefore, Rainey didn't specify which cannon it was about, but the US allies, Germany and Sweden, created improved wheeled systems, which have already been delivered to the Ukrainian battlefield. Ukraine has become the first foreign operator of the new German wheeled remote-controlled howitzer RCH-155. This is the first artillery system in the world that can shoot while moving. This is mainly necessary to avoid fireback from hostile artillery during counter-battery combat. The artillery module, AGM, which weighs 12.5 tons, is unmanned. The main focus is on charging automation, so the self-propelled artillery weapon crew consists of only 2 people, a commander and a driver. The howitzer's firing range is 25 miles. RCH-155 is probably so cool on the front line in Ukraine that the United Kingdom Ministry of Defense has decided to become an operator for this machine and switch to RCH-155 all their full-tracked AS-90, which, by the way, are in the ranks of the Ukrainian troops. The wheeled chassis may seem too vulnerable, but no. For example, the chassis self-propelled artillery vehicle Archer can withhold the detonation of up to 13 pounds of explosives and continue maneuvering even with all tires punctured. The combat compartment and the cabin with the engine compartment are armored. The Swedish system Archer is probably the most advanced and new self-propelled artillery vehicle on the Ukrainian front line. As the base of the self-propelled artillery vehicle, the Archer weapon was taken from the trailed howitzer in modification FH-77B, which is fixed on a special gimbaled platform in a rotating module, at the end of which there's a special balance weight to compensate for the impact force of the shot. The maximum shooting range is 18 miles with the regular shell, 25 miles with the rocket-assisted projectile, and 37 miles with the guided artillery shell Excalibur. This is definitely the most accurate howitzer in the world. It opens fire within 30 seconds of receiving the order. It can leave the firing position within 30 seconds, minimizing the hostile's ability to conduct counter-battery combat. Thus, the statistics of artillery damage favor the Ukrainian army. However, achieving the weight of fire remains critical, as the initiative on the battlefield belongs to the side that provides the shaft of fire. Modern artillery must be massive, fast, long range, and accurate. Nothing can be neglected. Do you think there will be a war that will level the importance of artillery? Share your thoughts in the comments.